Hello and welcome to Recruiting is No Joke. I am your host, Joel Lalgee, and I'm also known as the realest recruiter. You can see the sign up here, but it's great to be with you guys. As always, I have an amazing guest. We are going to learn all about talent. We're going to learn about how AI is impacting recruitment and so much more. We're going to look at some of these news stories. There's always a lot going on. I feel like over the last 6 months, it's like every week something crazy is going on. So we got lots to talk about, but I want to welcome Anna Taylor to the show. Anna, great to have you with us. How long have we been connected for? I feel like we've been connected for a couple of years now.
I think for a few years now. Yeah. I mean, I started following you in 2022 when I first took on the role that I'm in right now. And I just made the leap and became one of your lucky connections.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, and for anyone who doesn't know, LinkedIn actually caps connections at 30,000. I got like 200 something thousand followers. So, actually, there is some prestige in getting to that
Feel
30,000. But
really special.
all jokes aside, well, Anna, why don't you give us a quick intro on who you are, what you do, and I guess who you do it for, if that would work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the director of global talent acquisition at Semperis. Semperis is a cybersecurity software vendor. Our major focus is hybrid identity protection. And we've been Series C now for quite some time, since 2022, actually, and just growing really, really fast. So I've been there since January of 2022. We went from 140 employees to 500, and we're
Wow.
hiring all over the world and, not slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're hiring on your team as well. So how
Yeah.
big is the team right now? Where's everybody located?
I have a team of 4 recruiters at the moment, five actually. Sorry, I just brought on one that started 2 weeks ago.
Amazing.
And so there's 3 in Israel, one in Canada, and one in Dallas. And I am hiring another one in Dallas for my team because we've just recently opened an office there. So that they do work hybrid in Dallas, Texas for our company. And that's the location that I'll need.
So is the whole company, everyone's working hybrid around offices, or do you have people that work remotely? What's that setup look like?
Yeah, we do have people that work remotely. Like I'm based in Arizona, so I'm probably never going to be near one of our offices unless we for some reason decide that this is a cool place to build. But right now we have a few offices: Dallas, Texas; Hoboken, New Jersey; Ottawa, Canada; and Tel Aviv, Israel. And if you are by one of those offices, then you do work hybrid. But
Cool.
it's stated very upfront during the interview process, so it's not a surprise.
I guess with I feel like most people, I do a lot of polls on this sort of stuff, and I just did a
Yeah.
poll on what's your ideal work scenario, and I do think my audience probably shifts more towards remote work naturally because I post a decent
Mhm.
amount about that, but it usually comes in. It's pretty split between fully remote and hybrid, and then the in the office 5 days a week is always like four
It's
percent.
always like the last. Maybe like 2 people vote for that one. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's usually the same two people every time. I
every
won't
time.
go into who those people are,
I
but
need to interview them
um,
and understand why.
do you find that most people are kind of like happy with the hybrid, or I guess do you see a difference with the
Yeah,
conversation that you have with candidates that are looking for the fully remote role compared to the ones locally? I guess I just how does that work in conversations?
that's a great, topic. I mean, basically, I find it different for all departments and also all levels of
Mm,
experience. So, like for me, for example, I've had a major in-office experience already in my early career, right? So I already got a lot of that kind of sponge learning by osmosis situation that you get from learning in an office. So I'm happy to work fully remote now because it's very flexible for my family. I have 2 kids. It really works really well for us. But I will say that if I were hybrid, I would really enjoy it. I'd
yeah,
love to go to an office, 1 or 2 days a week just to get to see people, collaborate in person, work together. And some of the other candidates who are at the same, I guess, career level, they feel that way. And
yeah,
they're totally open to the hybrid and it's no problem for them. Because same as me, they like to have the option. Fully remote is hard, especially when you work in a global organization. The time zones can be really difficult, and finding times that sync up to be on video calls together can be really difficult. So, I do think the hybrid kind of motion has been really welcomed by a lot of people. But we also have a lot of people that want to be fully remote. So, it's so personal of a decision. You
Yeah,
just never know. But as long as the company is like really upfront about our expectations, and then we
it's
know that
huge.
it's a mutual match, that's how you'll make sure that it goes on, successfully. But it's such a personal option and decision.
Now, do people get to pick the days that they go in, or is that set? Like
So it
if it's a
depends on the
hybrid?
team. Some of the
Yeah.
teams it's set, and I think that makes a lot of sense because you don't want to go to an office where there's nobody there. Like
That's a
I've,
nightmare.
what my husband actually worked remote for a while during COVID, and then had to go to an office, and he would go to the office and be on Zoom. So
I
like,
know, I
what's the
know.
point? What's the point, right? And so like that's when it really takes an effort from the management to like make sure that people are coming in at the same time.
Yeah, that makes I didn't even think about that. So
Yeah, it's so silly.
that does make a lot of sense, to
Yeah,
kinda have it more coordinated. It's so funny because I like what you said about, you don't know until you have the conversation, and that's what I think is really interesting, right? Because
yeah,
I think, again, we're probably like similar life stage, right? Like I've got the kids at home, and now I'm fully remote because I run my own business, and I just don't
right.
have, I'm not going to spend, X amount of dollars on an office necessarily. But I think if I went to work for a company again, um, hybrid does seem attractive just because you get that collaboration with people, and
Mhm.
then you still get that focused work time, which I know everybody's like, oh, remote workers, they don't get as much work done. I find like I have to be in peace and quiet to get work done, and it's hard to do that in an office because I get more distracted. Um, but it is just so interesting because obviously I take a strong. I guess my stance has been pretty pro remote in the past, but now I'm just more like pro what works best for people. And genuinely, I think you do get to a point where you start to realize, like, hey, this is how I'm going to get the best results. And um, I think it's kind of a shame that it's become such a polarizing topic because at the end
Yeah,
of the day, that should be the heart of it. Like, hey, can we just create environments that people get the best work done? And I don't think it is just like a B or C. Like, I think it's different for every single person.
it is. It's really different for everyone, and I think the hybrid kind of gives you the best of both worlds. But I thought that was so funny that you just said that you get more work done potentially when you're in the peace and quiet of home. But I also feel like some fully remote workers actually overwork, right? Because it's right there.
100%.
Like my computer's right here. I can just
100%.
if I have something that I need to do, I'll step over at, 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night or something if I have to. But that's because I really enjoy my work and I have no problem doing that.
Yeah.
But there are some people that struggle with setting those boundaries when you're a fully remote worker.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely something people should be considering as well. If you go to an office, maybe you have a laptop, maybe you have a desktop, but after you leave that office, you're leaving work. Whereas when you work at home, you're home. Everything's
Yeah,
there.
it's like the one argument for the commute, right? It's like people have said with the commute, it can be kind of like what do they call that? Like
A break.
yeah, it's like a break.
Yeah.
It's like a clear boundary being set, a decompressing time. Maybe you throw on,
Yeah.
whatever your podcast or some music, and it's like,
I
hey,
used to
now,
call my mom
yeah,
on the way
exactly.
home.
You
That would be
just,
like my time when I would call my mom to say hi.
I love that. It's like a reset, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
all right, hey, cool. I've gone through this process now where like I've noticed like, hey, sometimes I will, get out of my office and like my kids are right there. And then suddenly it's like, I'm still in work mode. And, like, why are you annoyed? I'm like, because this really great client isn't being great now. Oh, my clients are great. But yeah, it's interesting. Well, look, what about, in terms of your story, like how did you get into recruitment? Walk me through like what that looked like. And, how you got into your current role too. Would love to kind of just hear that journey.
I really got into recruitment in a lot of ways. I think many of us fall into it, right? We joke about that in recruiting, but I've always worked for small companies. So very small businesses, as small as like a couple owns it, a family owned business, right? Things like that right out of college, early on in my career. And so I got to be exposed to anything and everything. And
Mm,
somehow I ended up, having recruiting always as just like a piece of my puzzle. So I wore a lot of different hats. Recruiting was always a piece of what I would do for that company, but because we weren't very large companies, recruiting wasn't actually a team. So it was like I was HR operations and I just also do recruiting, right? Like we didn't have a recruiter. So through all those years of experience, I learned a little bit more about recruiting more and more. And then I ended up getting into tech eventually. And so when I was in tech, again, recruiting ended up being a little bit more heavy of the focus, but I still had the role that was still benefits administration, payroll. I touched a little bit of finance, a little bit of everything and recruiting. So eventually I was introduced to this company, Semperis, by, kind of a mutual referral of a friend. And recruiting was the gap that they had on their HR team at the time. It was a small team. They had like one recruiter in Israel that was kind of trying to do as much as she could, right, with the roles. And they had two HR people, the VP of HR and our current senior director of global HR, who was the director of HR as well. That was the team. That's it. And they had this big gap in recruiting. So I said, you know what? That's great. Like, I'll go all in. I'll do recruiting. And that's really how I ended up in this position. It was just kind of, I see that you've done recruiting. I see that you've worked in startups. Do you want to do only recruiting? And that's really how I ended up doing this role. And it just has stayed there ever since. But we never thought that it would, I never thought at least that it would grow this big. I thought eventually they would need me to do other stuff, right? But
Mm.
talent acquisition seems to be the focus where I'm needed most, where I've, been most talented for the company as well. And it worked out, really to the benefit because I'm super enjoying it.
What industry were you in before getting into that cybersecurity industry?
Yeah, so before cybersecurity, my kind of into tech was actually HR tech, which I think
Mm.
was an awesome segue, right? Because from all of my experiences of being in HR and recruiting, I was using these things. I was doing payroll on ADP. I was, using different kinds of ATS systems for the recruiting aspect of things. And then I ended up going and working for a tech company that had an ATS and HRS system.
So
So
cool.
it was really cool because I both knew a lot about the product that we were selling and building and was using it, and
Yeah,
just
that's awesome.
gaining more experience in the HR and recruiting space.
What was there any kind of like learning curve? Because I hear a lot from people who, are in tech recruiting specifically. You definitely have heard things in the past where, if you haven't recruited for tech specific roles in the past, um, it's a big learning curve. So did you find that, or did you just find like, hey, I'm kind of used to, working with engineers and developers, that this isn't like that big of a transition?
There's always gonna be a time to learn, right? Nobody just, like, wakes up one day and is like, "Wow, I'm an experienced tech recruiter." Like, you have to learn something.
Yeah.
So, yes, like, there was definitely a learning curve for me. There's a learning curve on my team for technical recruitment, right? And I think the only way that you can be really successful with it is if you partner with the hiring manager really closely and the hiring manager is open to teaching you as much as they can. So you have to have those hiring managers that you get to work with. And I was very lucky to get to work with some of those that are open to, speaking your language to explain to you what they're looking for. Do I think that software engineers who become recruiters can be really successful and like maybe successful faster? Probably, right? Because they definitely speak the language.
Yeah.
But again, I still like very much am of the belief that like everyone starts somewhere
Yeah.
and they can probably learn anything if they have the right teacher and the right attitude for learning it. So I don't think the learning curve is like crazy steep.
What's the someone did ask me too the other day about the cybersecurity industry as a whole. From your perspective, I mean, it sounds like your company's growing. Like, is
Yeah.
that do you see cybersecurity as just a growing industry in general, or is your company kind of an outlier within the industry?
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity as an industry is definitely growing. I did see a lot of layoffs at some of our competitors or, other people in the industry, other companies in the industry in the last few years, of course, but they're still on a growth path. Cybersecurity is still very much on a growth path. And it's also just certain areas of cybersecurity. So especially after COVID with, identity and, knowing your employees and things like that, anything that's in the identity space is doing really well right now, which luckily that's where we are, right?
Yeah.
But I would say also people have to recognize that while cybersecurity is this very growing industry, it's not just security engineers and, SOC analysts. I think some people forget that like cybersecurity companies also need, operations people, customer success, finance people. You don't have to have necessarily done cybersecurity your whole life in order to work at a cybersecurity company. So I think
Yeah.
that's also like a lot of the conversations are around that, right? How do I get into cybersecurity? It doesn't have to be as a security engineer.
No, I love that. What about and we're gonna move to some of these news topics as well, but
Yeah.
I'm always curious about how AI specifically is like impacting the industry or the industry you're in.
Yeah.
Um, is there a lot of talk around AI with cybersecurity? I mean, in my mind, I'm like, it seems like they maybe would be adverse to AI, but I don't know. Like, what are you seeing? Is there a lot of innovation taking place? Is it top of everybody's mind? What are your thoughts with that?
It is top of mind, and actually, we are really adverse to AI here at Semperis. We don't actually use any major AI recruiting tools, which is, hard for my team, and
Yeah,
that's hard. Like that, people are saying you'll get left behind if you don't use AI recruiting tools, right? But also, we've done the research and we've done the evaluations of a lot of these AI recruiting tools, and a lot of them are still building upon OpenAI or
yeah,
other tools that are very open. And that makes us really nervous. And
yeah,
so we won't be approving or using any of those kind of tools, right? Because it's anytime that there's that little opening, that's what cybersecurity is about, right? All it takes is that little opening for someone who's a bad actor to get all your data. So GDPR requirements when you're hiring globally are super strict. You probably see that. So there's some countries that are implementing, anti-AI in recruiting laws.
yeah.
So we're of the mindset of let's just not touch it at the moment until we really, really need to, right? But for right now, I have tried some tools, and my security team really finds them very
uh, yeah,
all
it's
in.
that's super interesting, and I mean, in some ways, I feel like there's just so many. There's a lot of innovations that I see within recruiting and even with like job search as well. And
Yeah.
I know they had that release that it's like China released that was it Magna, whatever. That's like the AI agent, and long and behold, one of the three examples they gave, of course, was like scraping through resumes. And it's like this recruiter, and it's just really interesting because I've been in the space, a decade. I've been more involved in the AI scene and the vendors that are wanting to, innovate the space and disrupt the
Mhm.
space. And yeah, I just am surprised that I guess I'm not surprised, but in some ways I do feel a little bit surprised that like just recruiting as a whole, it's just I don't want to say it's under attack because that's not under attack, but um it's like there's a lot of people trying to disrupt recruiting
Yeah.
and take out humans out of the process. And I think what's really interesting, like you said, like you fell into recruiting, you fell into the people space, and a lot of times that's the story that happens. You don't have a lot of people that intentionally go into recruiting,
Mhm.
and the one common thing that people say is like, yeah, I just care about people. Like, something about matching people and building teams, and it's a very human thing. Like, I don't know many recruiters that fell into recruiting because they loved scheduling interviews or they
I
loved
know,
like
right?
reading resumes. That's not what it's
Yeah.
about. It's always about like I like getting together with my hiring managers and getting to know them. I like hearing what ticks, and then I like finding people that are going to be a fit for the
The
team, and they're
sourcing,
gonna,
like that big adrenaline rush you get when you find the
yeah,
one.
and having that conversation with that candidate who's just excited that they've been waiting for this role and now you have it. And I remember my first placement I ever got in recruiting, and my CEO at the time was like, "Oh man, like there's no better feeling than like the placement. Like it's just amazing." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then it happened. It was like everybody was excited. It's just this whole thing, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and we're trying to take out like the human aspect of recruiting from people that like love people, and it's really interesting to me, and it's also why I think a lot of recruiters are kind of adverse to a lot of the technology because the things that they enjoy are the human interactions, and that's kind
Mhm.
of what a lot of the tools now are promising to take away. Anyway, well, it's good to know. So any AI vendors out there, we just save you a bunch of time. You don't even need to hit up Anna for any kind of sales
Yeah.
pitches,
Don't
right?
pitch me. You don't need to slide into my DMs.
What about with LinkedIn though? Because LinkedIn's got some AI in
LinkedIn is
there.
using
So
some AI component, right? So, actually, they are in their AI in their in-mails for messaging. They're trying to
yeah,
help you with your messages and stuff like that. I will say I love LinkedIn, big fan, obviously, but those aren't working as well as
no,
some of our more personalized messages. And one thing that's interesting in their AI too is it like pulls up your most recent role as like, I'm Anna from, XYZ. So if you're like an advisor, or let's say you have like two different jobs because you do like side gigs and stuff too, it's going to pull up whichever one it wants. Usually it's wrong.
Mm,
Yeah, so that's been interesting. We played around with it a little bit, but no, again, LinkedIn AI as well. I think it's built on
yeah.
an open platform.
Interesting. Yeah, I was playing around with their like headline feature where you can change your headlines.
That one is cool.
And well, I don't know, like it was okay, but I was like, this isn't, I don't know, this just at a certain point I'm like, the whole idea of the headline is to capture and it's supposed to be different. So I'm like, if everyone's doing that, then maybe you can look different. But well, I want to. It's interesting. We're talking about like the identity. Obviously, your company is protecting people's identities, and this, and now that everything has just gone so online, like interviews online, we're running into some different issues. So I know I want to share the screen here. This is an article that you sent me, and we have a warning here that we got some fake employees floating around in interviews. So. Um, can you see the screen okay here?
Yeah, I can.
Awesome. So walk me through this. Like what happened here? And is this something that you're seeing? Obviously you hire globally. So
Mhm.
have you kind of run into some similar issues like this as well?
We have, yeah. When this article came out from Know Before, it was super interesting for my team and I to see it. And we all kind of talked about it in our team meeting that week and shared it with each other. And we're discussing, when this happens. We do see a really high inbound volume at Semperis, as a lot of other companies have been over the last few years. But especially in some of the engineering and the tech roles, we'll see a lot of resumes that actually look like each other. So whether that's because you're all using, candidates are using AI resumes, or not, it's suddenly you see these trends where almost one after another, while you as a person, not AI, are looking through the resumes, you notice like, wait, let me flip back. That one had the same company and all the same bullet points and all the same everything, right? So like we're seeing a lot of that kind of happening right now with candidates where that obviously like rings the
So
alarm.
wait. You're saying the same company,
The
same
same
bullet
company, the
points.
same bullet points, but it like might have a different name.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so we'll see that. The other things that we've been seeing is like sometimes we really like seeing people's LinkedIn profiles. It's very important to us actually, like whether you have a picture or not, right? Just like seeing your profile and that your profile matches your resume is like kind of important to see consistency across the board of your career. And we've also seen people who have put on like LinkedIn profiles that have maybe like two connections and like they just created it yesterday.
Interesting. So
Or
what do you think the purpose of that is? Like I don't really, sometimes I'm like,
it is a suspicion. Like we've actually gotten, notifications from certain organizations before that, we see this email address in your inbox or in your systems. This has been, shown to be a known threat, things like that, right? So
got it.
like a lot of companies are experiencing this, not just me. Like I've talked about this to a lot of other TA leaders as well that I know, and we're getting a lot of fraudulent candidates. They're just trying to get in however they can, and, what happened with Know Before was it sounds like this person actually really did get through all the steps. They actually, my understanding is that they did video interviews. They went through multiple video interviews. They got through all the steps. They actually got hired, got a laptop and everything. And then when they got on board, the IT, like the Know Before's security team, which kudos to them, was immediately, triggered because the person started trying to download something bad, to their laptop. And so within about 20 minutes, they were able to block off the laptop. Nothing ended up happening. The company wasn't harmed, in any way as a result of this, but
But
it just says
where
a
did they
lot
send the
about the
laptop to?
process.
Where did they
What?
send the laptop to?
That I don't know. I was reading about that, but I saw also that they're gonna start sending like, you should always make sure you send the laptop, obviously, like, to a very specific, like, person, confirm the address, like, all that stuff, maybe send it certified, right? Like, require signature and ID. Um, so I don't know really a lot about their processes, but I just thought it was super interesting, and we have not experienced this yet, right? But we have experienced, like I said, like, seeing candidates that we suspect are probably fraudulent candidates. We have had people who will get on, video calls and like we just met them like the day before with a different name. We've actually had that happen before. And the same recruiter, we're a small team. So if the same recruiter is working the same role, they'll
Yeah.
recognize the person and be like, didn't I just meet you? Right. So it's those kind of things that are happening that I think at bigger companies, I don't know how big Know Before is, but I think at bigger companies is a little harder to catch.
Yeah, I'm sure. And especially if, depending, that relationship between even the hiring manager and the recruiter,
Hmm.
that's not always as close. Um, curious question. It's a little bit of a different topic here, but when you're looking, you mentioned you get all of these applications through. So, obviously, anyone who follows my content, I talk a lot about how the job market is competitive and it's hard to stand out. Um, and you mentioned like obviously in this case it's like scams, right? Where resumes look the
Hmm.
same. But are you kind of seeing that across the board where like are resumes kind of coming in and just like looking similar? And like what would be some of the things that, you would look at that maybe separate people out? And like how do you approach the resume? Like you get a resume, like where do your eyes go? What are the things that people have on there that kind of really makes them stand out from hundreds of thousands of applicants?
That's a great question. People are always wondering this, right? But the ATS is not filtering you out.
No.
Really, a person with eyes is looking at your resume, and the easier it is to read, the better you're going to do, right? From most companies, in getting through that first screening, it just has to be easy to read. So, we love to see resumes that don't have like a ton of columns on them because it's
Yeah.
really hard for your eyes to go up and down, right across columns. But if you're trying to scan for something, if something's very nicely organized with like bullet points and very clear and black and white, not too many colors that would distract the eyes, it's just easier to read. And so you're more likely to be seen. Not to say that the person with the columns doesn't have great experience also, but the resume that's really easy to read, easy and clear to read is going to be better seen by recruiters.
Where
Um,
do your eyes go first
yeah,
when you look at a resume? Like if you have
my
a
eyes.
resume in front of you, where do they go first?
Yeah. So first, the eyes are going to go right to professional experience. So a lot of people are sticking, the objective or a summary. They're doing skills based resumes and things like that. But really, we're going straight to professional experience. I want to see where are you working now, where did you work before, and what did that entail? Like that's
Yeah.
what I'm looking for.
So interesting.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because like to me, that's like I'm the same way. And it's because like that's the first question the hiring manager always has. Like,
Yeah.
where did they work? How long did they work there for? And then, it's like you do like some mental math, right? And you're like, hey, last 10 years, like how many jobs have you had? Because if the hiring manager might have said, I don't want anybody who's
Am I
had,
wrong? Yeah.
5 jobs in the last 10 years or hasn't had a stint of over 4 years. So you're kind of like looking at those things.
Hmm.
Um, what about like, are you seeing a lot of resumes that like are matching to like the job description? And is there any caution in there of like, maybe that's not the best strategy, right? To just like kind of match things up with the job description with AI.
I haven't actually. I have seen articles about that on LinkedIn and people have talked about that too, right? That some candidates are taking the list of requirements in the job description and sort of trying with AI to like just match it and like put it on their resume so that maybe they
Yeah.
stand out or get caught by some kind of a keyword scanner or something. I haven't actually seen it that much. I think it would be hard to do because our job descriptions also, we try not to have them be super lengthy. So if you were to try and do that, your resume would be kind of short.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it makes sense. So make sure that you are making your resume easy to read and
Hmm.
then making sure like it's super clear, what you've accomplished in your last role
Yeah.
and that's really easy. Are you like a stickler for like one page or two page or like any thoughts on that? Like do you
No.
no, okay, yeah.
No, I really think, I mean, how can somebody who's been working for 20 years put all that experience on one page?
I know. Well, I get so
How
many
can you do that?
candidates I work with who are like, or they'll join like a live show and they're like, yeah, like, do I got to get everything down on one page? And I'm always like, well, no, but like in reality, you should probably have like your most relevant experience and accomplishments on
At the
that first
top.
page.
Yeah.
It's like you don't want it like buried in the third page, right? And then I'm just like, just go through each line and make sure is it relevant to the position I'm applying to? Like,
Mhm.
does this bullet point back up why I'm a good fit for the role? And it's like in your case, when you're wearing lots of hats, if you were doing things in payroll and you're going for a recruiting role, like nobody cares about payroll, right? So it's like you don't
Mhm.
need that on the resume. And I think it's a big pressure for people to try and list all of their experience versus like just relevant experience for the positions they're applying to. And
Right.
making it easy for the recruiter to go, wow, yeah, I totally see it. I see why you applied for the position. Um, if you don't see that experience, or maybe the exact experience the hiring manager is looking for, like, would you still like look at the professional summary, or like how important is that? And like, does it depend on the hiring manager even? Like, what's that been like in your history
Yeah.
of recruiting?
It definitely depends on the hiring manager. There are some hiring managers that we work with that are just way more open to kind of our creativity and, suggestions. I've had it happen quite a few times now with certain hiring managers where one of my recruiters who's really strong at this, she just kind of sees a resume, she maybe does a screening and she just feels like this is the one. The hiring manager has to meet this person and she'll have reasons, right? Like she'll have bullet points that she can write out for the hiring manager, but the hiring manager will look at the resume and say, like, "What are you talking about? Like, that's not what I asked you for." And she'll
Mm,
go, "Just meet him. Just meet him or her. Like, just have one call." And then we end up hiring that person.
yeah.
And it's because we are really good at reading between the lines, right? That's kind of what we do. Hiring managers are good at what they do. What we do is try to understand your work ethic, your soft skills, your fit for the team, all around you as a person, and if we really feel strongly about it, we will push with the hiring manager. And I would say like 9 times out of 10, it ends up being the hire.
Yeah, I love that. It's again, like kind of going back to the whole AI and recruiting thing.
Yeah,
This is something which
only a person can do that.
I think, yeah. I think it's someone in a previous interview said that, like good recruiting is like hearing the things that aren't said. And now you're saying like, hey, a good recruiting when it comes to screening the resume and having the conversation, it's like seeing the skills that aren't on paper and getting that
Yeah.
sense for that. And I do think that that's something that's a challenge. And when I see what I see kind of happening is that some of these teams are going to go, hey, we've got an AI recruiter, and anyone who's worked with a hiring manager knows like you don't get like unlimited chance with a hiring manager as a recruiter. Like that you can lose that trust quickly if you start sending them candidates that they're not looking for, they're not interested in.
They're
They
gonna think
will.
you're wasting time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be like, oh, Anna, that recruiter in your team, like I don't want to work with them anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Frustrating.
all it takes is that AI recruiter to make a mistake, or send people that aren't good, or like just send people who maybe have a good resume and
Mhm.
say all the right things, but maybe they were just reading from a script or whatever it is. A couple of those things happen, and I think that's when even hiring managers might be like, "All right, we need a little bit more quality assurance here with these recruiters. Like, we need to have a real conversation."
Right.
Um, so super curious about that. Well, the other piece of news that happened this week as well, um, a news article came out on LinkedIn. Can you see this? Is it shared it?
Not yet.
Okay, let me. Here we go. So it sounds like
Okay.
well, not more than ever, but more than since 2009, which was kind of coming out of the Great Recession. The numbers are showing now that um, almost 9 million people in the US have multiple jobs, and they're claiming that having one job isn't enough. Like you got to have a side hustle, you got to be making extra income, and this is the highest number um, since 2009. That's what the
Wow.
article says. Um, and I looked at the graph too. There's like a graph that the original article showed, which I might be able to see here. Um, yeah, so it's an article. Let me see where it is.
Is that like of full-time jobs? Like they're saying that people have multiple full-time jobs, or is this like a side gig? Because definitely in the last few years, people get more side gigs.
I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix of both. Probably more side hustles and hobbies out
Mhm.
there. But there was a graph too on one of these articles that shows it. Um, yeah, I can't find that graph anymore. But the original graph that I saw, basically what it showed is like a graph showing in 2009 what the level was at, and then it went down, and then during COVID it
Mhm.
actually dropped down really low, and then it's kind of been gradually going back up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I guess when you're interviewing people or even with your current employees, like, are you seeing more people being open about side hustles? Like, what are you experiencing with your team? And like, is this something that you're screening for when you're interviewing people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, sometimes you don't know, and it's really hard to know, but on occasion or pretty often, people will have it on their LinkedIn profile that they have, another job or a side gig, and you'll be able to see it there and kind of ask them about it in a screening. Something really cool though is that sometimes people's side gigs are awesome, and like we're really okay with them continuing them. Like one, we have a person whose side gig is like she's a DJ on the weekends, and she does like bar mitzvahs and weddings and stuff. And
That's
so like
awesome.
it's awesome, right? And so we're like, yeah, totally keep doing that. That's really cool. So as long as the side gig doesn't conflict with,
Yeah.
what we're expecting you at Semperis to do in a full-time job, like I love it. It's, for a lot of people, they have these cool kind of quirks and fun facts about them that you learn through knowing about their side gigs. So
Well, isn't
I
it
don't know. I
isn't it
think
like
people should be
the
honest about it. Like, why not?
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of conflicting advice around this one. I know I think it was Scott Galloway or Professor Scott Galloway. He had talked about how he doesn't think that side hustles um you should have a side hustle because you should just focus on one thing, which like I can understand the rationale in that in some
Yeah.
ways, right? Because I think to your point, like if it's not taking away from the business, but I've also seen some CEOs say like, "Hey, I love the idea of like employees having something else, something that they're passionate about as well."
Yeah.
And it gives people maybe a chance to try out running a business or doing different parts of a business as well.
Hmm.
Um, but then there is also people who have like the two jobs, which we've seen more of that with remote work, where
Yes.
people are balancing like two full time jobs, which I just think is in my mind, I am just like think that's insane.
It's
Um,
insane.
but overall, the reason that people are doing this is because they're not actually a lot of people are citing the fact that they're just not making enough money in their current job.
Yeah.
Um, so and I think, obviously with inflation, how that's been the last couple of years, even like company bonuses seem to be down as well a lot of times, or like companies saying, "Hey, we're just not able to do bonuses." And then I think a lot of people are also afraid of, being laid off, and they want to have like a backup plan as well.
Hmm.
Um, but I think this is a trend. I don't see it going away. I mean, I see more and more people are looking at additional ways to make income. Um, but to your point, I think as long as it's not affecting your day job and you're getting the results, I think that is the most important thing, and that's what employers care about. Have you ever had a situation where like you found out about a side hustle, or like that's kind of come up? Has that ever been something you've dealt with?
No, really not for us. So often, people are very open and honest with us about their side hustles because, as opposed to like the DJ example, right? So we have a lot of Microsoft MVPs on staff and a lot of really like technical experts in the field of identity and cybersecurity. And so often, I don't know if I would call it a side hustle, but many of them do have, blogs. They do speaking engagements. They have sort of this like identity outside of, Semperis. And we're very okay with that. We
I know
think
you
that's
see more and
awesome.
more people doing that too, like the
Yeah,
personal
it's awesome.
branding and yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of a personal branding aspect, but it's still within the industry of, the role that we're playing. Now, would I want them to start consulting, for customers of ours or having any sort of like conflicts like that? That's where we do have a struggle, right? And that can happen in the cybersecurity industry when somebody wants to be an expert in the product or an expert in their field. And, companies start asking them for advice and, then you're kind of going away from your full-time role. But for the most part, it's really encouraged here to have those kind of speaking engagements, have those learning opportunities and, networking in cybersecurity in general. Like it's a really cool industry for that.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Well, look, I know we're about time here, and I want to be sensitive every time. I always ask people at the end, what would be like your advice to anybody who is either early in their career or they're looking to grow in their career. Like, what's something that you learned throughout your time, and what's that piece of advice you would give to somebody who's just starting out in their career?
I love this question and I actually love to give this advice too. So for me when I was 23, right? Like my first job out of college, like I said I was working for a small company and often I really think that that's where you're going to learn the most. You don't have
Mm,
to go to a small company versus big company or whatever, but what you need to be doing is going to a role where you're going to learn as much as possible that can set you up for success in the rest of your career. So it's foundational knowledge that you'll take with you to every single position. And so, really, I think my major advice is just be open to almost anything and everything, because you never know like where that path can take you. And if a job seems really exciting and the manager seems really helpful and seems like a person that's going to teach you a lot, go for it. Learn, use it for what you can and like get that experience so that you can continue to use it throughout your career. I think that would be my biggest piece of advice, is just to be open, to opportunities and experiences.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's huge. And I know
Yeah.
a lot of people obviously graduating right now,
Hmm.
a little bit more of a challenging market in general. One of the things you mentioned is like you got your current position through like a networking and relationships. So like how do you kind of approach those types of relationships, or like what's been your position on like networking, and how like I guess what's your best like networking tip for people?
I think again, just like being open, right, to the conversation and having no fear to talk to anybody. So one of my favorite hiring stories actually at Semperis is somebody who was going for a BDR position right out of college, right? He was still a student at the time, and he really wanted our BDR job, but he didn't live where we were advertising it for. He had like all these like negatives against him, but he kind of like BDR'd, like business developmented his way into this BDR job. And he's now like a commercial rep here and did amazing.
That's
So
awesome.
he reached out to me on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and he just asked for a conversation, and that's not always going to work. People aren't going to always have time to like have those conversations with you. But if you don't try, you'll never know. You don't
Yeah.
ask, you don't get, right? And he gave it a shot and it ended up working out. So I would
And I wonder
say
from his
that's what we
perspective
can do.
how many messages he sent out. Like I
Oh my God,
doubt
I
that
wonder. That's a great,
I
I don't know. I never asked him that actually. I never was like, am I special, or did you send that same message to like 50 people?
well, I just think like you said, it's like if you don't ask, don't get. I know
Yeah.
one of the things I am conscious of is like for job seekers, they have a lot of advice, and there's a lot of people quick to be like, "This is the secret. This is the way."
Yeah.
And I like what you said, where it's like, "Hey, this isn't always going to work, right?" Because sometimes what people hear is they hear, "Oh, that worked. Now it's going to work for me," and then it doesn't work for them. And but I do think like just knowing the type of role you're applying for as well is really important. Like I think for sales, like those types of proactive outreach can work really well because you're kind of showing
Absolutely.
versus telling. Whereas
Yeah.
maybe if you're in like graphic design or you're in marketing, it's like put together a portfolio and show your work. Start creating content, right? That can open up doors. Um, and I think I love that part too about the open conversations, because I think what happens is people get in their careers or they get into their job and then
Mhm.
they stop doing the networking. They stop building those relationships, and then it's like, oh, I lost my job or something happened and I got laid off, and now I'm like trying to activate the networking real quick. Like, hey, do you have a job? And it's like those relationships are huge. So, um, what's on the plan for you this year in terms of events? Are you got anything fun going on events wise?
This is a good question. I don't have my plans yet. I do have a member
Okay,
of my team who's going to be attending the Women in Cybersecurity conference. It's actually in Dallas this year in April. So that should
cool,
be really cool. She's going to check it out. There's a career fair there. We're excited to learn a little bit more about that organization, Women in Cyber, and that event, because it's huge. Every single year it sells out like pretty
so
much
cool.
immediately from their registrations. And later in the year, I'm definitely looking into, some other events that I could potentially go to. I want to get back out, in the cyber world a little bit more. But if anyone has advice on events to go to, I'm always open to it too.
Yeah, I
LinkedIn
love
Talent
that.
Connect always comes up, right? It's usually in October, so that one will be one.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that. And
Yeah.
where can people best connect with you? Where can they connect with the career page? Like what's the best place to reach you?
Yeah. So semperis.com/careers, that's our careers page. We have a really robust website, amazing marketing team. So you're going to find a ton of information there about our company and about our jobs. And then LinkedIn. My team is all really active on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me, to reach out to me. I'll try and answer whenever I can. If I'm not the recruiter on that specific opening you're interested in, I'll direct you to the right place to go. And you can always just apply online. We also have a general interest form. So, general interest form is something that we do actually look at. It's not just, a black hole of resumes. But otherwise, just keep an eye on what we're doing. We're
Do
always
you have
on
a
the
lot
go.
of out of curiosity? Do you have a lot of people fill out a general interest form?
We do actually. Yeah, we do. And it's kind of cool to see, those interest forms come in because often we do use them. I have people that I've been connected with since like 2022 or otherwise, like during recruiting processes who just maybe it wasn't the right time, maybe it wasn't the right role. And like we've just brought them on recently. So you never know. Like everyone has to remember networking's a long game, right? It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Nothing's going to happen overnight. And you have to just start to establish those relationships. And if you don't express interest, like I said, if you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't express interest, how will we know that you were ever interested in working here?
No, I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Anna, great to have you on the show. So glad we're
Thank
able to do
you.
this. I would just recommend anyone who is out there that's looking to connect, always just be patient. I know I spend all my time on LinkedIn. I don't think Anna spends as much time on LinkedIn as me.
Like, yeah.
So just be patient and, just say, hey, heard you on the Recruiting is No Joke podcast. Appreciate your time. I know we're cutting it close here. So, I will just say to everyone, Anna is just great content creator, puts out a ton of valuable content as well. So if you're looking for like a newer voice with career, with recruiting, definitely worth connecting up. And yeah, appreciate your time again. Hopefully we'll be able to meet in real life
Yeah.
this year, depending on the conferences you go to.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Great to see
Yeah,
you.
we'll talk soon.